Page 45. We're going to put a few units together, adding integers, adding real numbers, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. We're going to look at the rules for all of those, and then we'll cover some examples. So to add two numbers with the same sign, either both positive or both negative, we're going to just add their absolute values and give the sum the same sign. Okay, great. Well, what's an absolute value? Absolute value is just a number without its sign, whether the sign is positive or negative, number without its sign, or zero. So absolute value says if there's a negative sign, take it away. Alternatively, it is defined as the distance from zero. Zero is zero away from zero, from itself, right? One is one away. Negative one is also one away from zero. So absolute value, just strip off a negative sign if there is one. If it's already positive or already zero, just leave it alone. Okay, to add two numbers with opposite signs. So what we're going to do is we're first going to find the difference of their absolute values. So there are those absolute values again. By subtracting the lesser absolute value from the greater one. So take the little one away from the big one. And then we're going to give the difference the same sign as the number with the greater absolute value. And again, we'll get examples of all of these. To subtract a negative number, change the subtraction sign to an addition sign. And add the absolute value of that number. Okay, so notice that what we're doing is we're basically taking a negative or something minus a negative, two negatives. Two negatives don't always make a positive. It depends on what you're doing with those negatives. But here, when you subtract a negative, that's the same as adding a positive. It's two opposites canceling each other out. And the product or quotient of a positive and negative number, so that's the answer to the multiplication problem, the answer to the division problem. Positive and negative is going to be negative. Positive and positive is positive. Negative and negative is, my first thought was negative when I first learned this, but it's actually positive. And that's, again, because the opposite of the opposite. If I flip around and then I flip back around, I'm right where I started. So negative and negative, two negatives multiplied together or divided make a positive. So we can do that in chart form. We've got positive, negative, negative, positive. If they're the same, it's positive. If they're different, it's negative. Let's get some examples. Okay, let's start with negative 27 plus negative 138 plus 55. Okay, so we're going to do this in two steps. We're going to start right here. I'm adding two numbers that have the same sign, negative and negative. So I add their absolute values. 27 plus 138 gives me 165. I'm not done yet, though. I need to tack on that negative sign. Now you might say, wait, two negatives make a positive. They do if they're multiplied or divided, But when we add them, you're basically saying, I'm $27 in debt and you're $138 in debt. Let's pool our money. Wait, now we're even further in debt. It doesn't mean that we suddenly have some money, sadly enough. Okay, so we bring down the plus 55. Now we have the sum of numbers with opposite signs. So we take their absolute values, 165 and 55. We're going to subtract their absolute values. We get 110. And then, so this is our work. And then we're going to take the 110 and attach the sign that belongs to the number with greater absolute value. 165 is bigger than 55, so we'll attach a negative sign. Negative 110. And that kind of makes sense. If you owe $27 and then you owe over 100 more and you get 55, you're still going to be owing some money. So it's just nice to make sure that these answers are reasonable. Number 2, negative 3/7 plus negative 6/7 plus 2/7. Okay, this is very, very similar to problem 1, believe it or not. Now we have fractions, but we looked out, they're all the same denominator. So we can actually solve this very, very similarly. They're just all over 7, and then at the end, if we can reduce it, we will. So you can work on that. Either pause it and work on that or come back to it later. And the same for this, negative 23 2/3 plus negative 16 1/2. Now we have two numbers. They're both mixed numbers. They have different denominators, so think about what you have to do before you can start putting those numbers together. Number 4. And the next page is also going to be all examples, so feel free to move on to the next page whenever you're ready, or the back of this page. Negative 2 3/4 plus 7/8. So this is kind of a tricky one. Here's how I would do this one. I'd say, well, I know I need the same denominator, right, because I'm adding fractions. So I would start by turning this into negative 2 6/8 plus 7/8. Now we have opposite signs. So remember, we're taking the absolute values. The absolute value of negative 2 6/8 is just 2 6/8, and subtracting the smaller absolute value, 7/8. So this is 2 6/8 minus 7/8, which gives us, well, if I have 2 whole pizzas and 6 slices, and I want 7 slices, time to slice up another pizza. I'll take away 1, and then I'll add 8 more slices, because I get 8 slices out of that 1 pizza. I have 1, and then 14 minus 7, so 1 7/8. 1 7/8. But we're not done yet. We need to attach the sign that goes with the larger absolute value, which is negative. So my answer is going to be negative 1 7/8. I could even put a negative sign out here. That's kind of what I'm doing. If you take 095, actually I don't think we're doing it in 095. If you take college algebra and you see factoring out a minus sign, that's kind of what we're doing. But we can just apply that rule if we don't want to think about it that way. If we just think about it as take the absolute values, take their difference, and tack on that minus sign if it's needed. And you can also convert to improper and do it that way. Let's take a look at number 5. 382 1/4 minus 93 9/10. Notice we're subtracting, oops, sorry, that's minus negative 93. 9/10. We're subtracting a negative. So some people, I've seen people write it like this, just kind of making those two negative signs into a big positive sign, however you want to do it, but you're adding the opposite. And I'll let you work on that one. Number 6. Let's see, let's find negative 22 1/3 minus x. When x equals negative 41. So this is just a fancy way of saying find negative 22 1/3 minus negative 41. Just substitute in negative 41 for x. Keep your parentheses around it. And then you can solve it similar to how you solved number 5. I'm going to move on to the next page. Number 7. Negative 23 3/10 plus 16 minus negative 32 minus 4 1/5 plus 6. Something important to bring up here is that order of operations matters. We'll get into that more later on, but know that you need to work from left to right. If I add 6 and 4 1/5 first, and then subtract that sum, I will get the wrong answer. So the way I like to do it is just look at this as 2, you know, look at this pair, and then this, and then this, and then this. So give that a shot. We're using all sorts of things that we learned in that one. I'll go ahead and give you the answer, just so that you can check your work. So feel free to work on it first. But I get 26 1/2 when I do that. And if you don't, go ahead and go back through here, see if you can figure out what might have happened. Number 8, let's do some decimals. You can do that too. 32.6 minus negative 14.1, and throw some more in here, minus 2.9 plus negative 82. So again, I start with the leftmost operation because these are all adding and subtracting. If I had multiplication or division, I'd have another story. 32.6 minus a negative, so that's the same thing as 32.6 plus 14.1. Add those together, we get 46.7 minus 2.9 plus negative 82. So I'm just bringing down all of this. I am not adding these yet. I may or may not get the right answer if I do it that way. Now we'll combine these. 46.7 minus 2.9. I can just do 467 minus 29, scoot the decimal point over, and then throw the decimal point back in. Or I can just line them up. 46.7 minus 2.9. And I can't take 9 from 7, so I will regroup, just like we do with mixed numbers. I'm going to regroup. I'm going to turn that 6 into a 5. Take that 1 whole, turn it into 10 tenths, which I can even write just like this. 17 tenths now. So 17 minus 9 is 8. 45 minus 2 is 43. So I have 43.8 plus negative 82. I'm adding two things with opposite signs, so I need to subtract them, find the difference of their absolute values. 82 minus 43.8 is going to be, let's see, 38.2, I believe. And then I have to figure out if it's positive or negative. Well, this one's bigger absolute value-wise, so it's negative 38.2. Number 9. Do some multiplication. 3 times negative 6 times 2 times negative 3 times negative 1/2. We can do this a few ways. Because it's all multiplication, I just work left to right. And actually, because multiplication is commutative and there's no division in here, I could do any order I wanted. But if I work left to right, I can just do 2 at a time. I can also look at this and say I have 1, 2, 3 negative signs. So that's flip, flip, flip. It's going to be negative at the end. So 3 times negative 6, figure out that, then multiply by 2, and so on. Whatever your answer is, it should be negative, and see if you can figure out what that is. Number 10, we'll take negative 17 and 4/7 times negative 3 and 1/4. Okay, so we have different denominators. I want you to ask yourself if we need a common denominator first. Is that our first step? Do we do something else? Feel free to pause. This is multiplication, right? We do not need a common denominator. We're actually okay having 7ths and 4ths. What we do want is some improper fractions here. So we'll make those improper. We'll multiply across. We'll simplify if we need to. Negative times negative is positive. So our answer is going to be positive something. Should be a little bigger than 51 because 3 times 17 is 51. So we'll get an answer that's a little bigger than 51, a couple bigger than 51. Let's look at example 11. Negative 28 and 2/5 divided by 4/3. Again, I want improper fraction, and then I can worry about my division. Keep in mind the keep, change, flip, and ask yourself, before even starting it, what sign is this going to have? You can look back at your chart if you need to. Example 12, 24.5 divided by negative 2 and 5/6. Again, we need to make these improper, and I'll leave the rest up to you. While we're at it, let's take a look at some application problems. So we're comparing Boston, Massachusetts to Bangor, Maine. Trying to figure out what low temperature Boston would have if Bangor has negative 13 degrees Fahrenheit. So we've got a negative in there. Maybe we need to add, subtract. You'll have to figure that out from the word problem. When you're done, make sure that your answer is that Boston is warmer than Maine. If Boston is not warmer than Maine, then you need to take a look at your signs. Here, number 2, we have a balance. So we're starting with this. And then we're writing another check, and then we're writing, well, we're getting an overdraft charge. So we need to know what his balance is going to look like after this is deducted and after this is deducted. So think about what that means, what deducted even means. Number 3 is kind of similar to number 1. It's a temperature difference. And I want you to think about the difference between Syracuse and Orlando. So make sure that your final answer has the appropriate sign, whether it's positive or negative. Number 4, we've got a temperature dropping by 1/2 degree every minute. So here's this expression for the temperature. Started out at 83, and it goes down by 1/2 every minute. The temperature after 8 minutes, so we have minus 1/2. Instead of T, I'm going to plug in 8. Because we're saying 8 is the time. plus 83. And I think you can take it from there. Number 5, we're looking at the cliff's height changing. And you can do this and get a decimal as your answer, or do it and get a fraction, depending on how you want to think of it. Notice that your answer for the cliff's height should be a small number, right? It's not changing dramatically. And it should be, think about the sign. Is it positive or is it negative? What's happening to this cliff, to the height of this cliff? When you're done, go ahead and take a look at page 93, the worksheet on 93, and I'll meet you in the next video.